I stared at my phone as my mother's voice cut through the silence of my apartment. Maya, we need to talk about Vanessa's wedding. I set down my coffee mug, already sensing something was wrong. What about it? I asked. There was a pause, then she said it. We think it's better if you don't come. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My own sister's wedding, and I was being uninvited. Preston's family is very particular, she continued. Old money, you understand. Your financial situation might make things awkward. Before I could respond, my father's voice joined the call. You can't even afford a decent dress, Maya? We're doing you a favor. Trust us on this. The line went dead. I sat there, stunned, looking around my small apartment with its second-hand furniture and peeling paint. Then my eyes landed on my laptop screen, still open to a spreadsheet labeled Ashford Estate Q4 Financials. A bitter smile crossed my face. They had no idea. The luxurious venue where Vanessa would say her vows, the place they'd been bragging about for months, belonged to me. I owned it. Every chandelier, every marble floor, every perfectly manicured garden, and they were about to find out in the most spectacular way possible. 4 years earlier, everything changed when Grandma Ruth died. Most of the family didn't even attend her funeral. They'd written her off decades ago when she married a mechanic named Frank, a man they considered beneath our family's status. But I loved her. While my parents and sister chased country club memberships and designer labels, I spent weekends at Ruth's modest house, listening to her stories and helping her with crossword puzzles. She was the only one who never made me feel like I wasn't enough. When her lawyer called me to his office, I expected maybe a few $1,000s and some jewelry. Instead, he slid papers across his desk showing an inheritance of $2.8 million and the deed to a crumbling historic estate outside the city. Your grandmother had one condition, he said. You must keep this secret from your family for as long as possible. She wanted to see who truly valued you. I understood immediately. Ruth knew how my family treated me. She'd watched them pour money into Vanessa's education while I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college. This was her final gift and her final test. I took the money and bought the Ashford estate, pouring every dollar into restoration while keeping my secret locked tight. Growing up as the family disappointment shaped everything about me. Vanessa was 3 years younger, but light years ahead in my parents' eyes. She was beautiful, charming, and knew exactly what to say at dinner parties. I was awkward, asked too many questions, and never understood why everyone cared so much about appearances. When Vanessa turned 16, our parents threw her a party at the yacht club and gifted her a BMW with a giant bow on top. When I turned 16, I got a card with $50 inside and a lecture about being more like my sister. The pattern continued through college. They paid for Vanessa's private university education, her sorority fees, her study abroad trips. I got a congratulations when I earned a scholarship to community college and criticism when I couldn't afford to join them for expensive family vacations. I told myself their approval didn't matter, that I was building my own path. But deep down, every dismissive comment, every time they introduced Vanessa as our daughter and me as our other daughter, it carved another small wound. The wedding on invitation wasn't just about one event. It was the culmination of 28 years of being told I wasn't good enough to stand beside them. I watched through the security cameras as my mother and Vanessa walked through Ashford Estate for their final venue tour. The wedding planner, a woman I'd hired personally, guided them through the ballroom where crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across white marble floors. This is perfect, my mother gushed, running her hand along a gold-trimmed column. This is exactly the kind of place Vanessa deserves, so much better than anything Maya could ever dream of affording. Vanessa laughed, twirling in the center of the room. Can you imagine Maya here? She'd probably show up in jeans and ask the caterer about their profit margins. They both giggled like conspirators. The wedding planner mentioned that the owner valued privacy and rarely made appearances at events. Probably some old money recluse, Vanessa said. Someone who'd have a heart attack if they met someone like my sister. From my office, I watched Troy, my assistant, glance at me nervously. My knuckles were white from gripping the edge of my desk. You okay, boss? He asked quietly. I forced my hands to relax and smiled. Perfect, I said. Everything is going exactly as planned. I wasn't ready to reveal myself yet. I wanted to watch them celebrate their exclusive venue, their perfect wedding, their elite connections. I wanted them to feel completely secure in their world before I pulled back the curtain. Preston Whitmore's email surprised me. He requested a private meeting at the estate to discuss the wedding costs. I'd never met Vanessa's fiancé, and my family had painted him as just another shallow, rich kid. But something about his message seemed genuine, almost worried. I sent Troy to meet with him instead of going myself. Troy reported back an hour later, looking thoughtful. "He's not what I expected," Troy said. "He seems really uncomfortable with how much your family is spending. He thinks they're treating him like an ATM." Preston had asked about flexibility on the $75,000 venue fee, explaining that while his family had money, it wasn't unlimited. My mother and Vanessa had apparently been adding expensive upgrades without consulting him, and he was starting to feel used. "He's a decent guy stuck in a bad situation," Troy concluded. I considered this carefully. Preston wasn't the enemy here. If anything, he was another victim of my family's obsession with status and appearances. An idea formed in my mind. "Offer him a $10,000 discount," I told Troy, "but with one condition. He has to add my name to the guest list." Troy raised his eyebrows. "You want to be there?" "Oh yes," I replied. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Preston agreed immediately, grateful for both the discount and the chance to do something kind. The text from my mother came 3 days later. "Vanessa has decided to extend you an invitation after all. Preston requested it. Please don't make us regret this. Dress code is black tie. We trust you'll find something appropriate." I read it twice, waiting for an apology that never came. No acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused by uninviting me. No recognition that excluding your daughter from her sister's wedding was cruel. Just a begrudging re-invitation with a thinly veiled insult about my ability to dress appropriately. I walked to my closet and pulled out a garment bag I'd been saving. Inside was a custom-made gown in deep emerald silk that I'd commissioned 6 months ago from a designer in New York. It cost $12,000, more than my parents had spent on Vanessa's entire Sweet 16 party. The color would photograph beautifully against the cream marble of my estate. I texted back simply, "I'll be there." My mother's response came immediately, "Please try to blend in." I smiled at my phone. Blending in was the last thing I planned to do. I'd spent my whole life trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable so I wouldn't embarrass them. Not anymore. This time, I was going to shine so brightly they couldn't look away. Being added to the family group chat felt like walking into a room where everyone had been talking about you. The conversation was already flowing with wedding details, seating arrangements, and photos of expensive floral arrangements. Then Becca, Vanessa's cousin and maid of honor, posted a message clearly aimed at me. "Just a reminder, everyone, cocktail hour is premium open bar only, top shelf drinks. We have a reputation to maintain." She followed it with, "Maya, if you need help with your outfit, I know some really affordable rental places. No shame in staying within your budget." The crying laughing emojis flooded in. My Uncle Harold added, "Maybe she can borrow something from the wait staff. They'll probably be dressed nicer than her anyway." More emojis. More laughter at my expense. I felt my face burning as I read through the messages. These were people who claimed to love me, family who'd known me my entire life, and they were publicly mocking my financial situation in a group chat. Part of me wanted to type out an angry response. Part of me wanted to screenshot their cruelty and send it to Preston. Instead, I wrote simply, "Don't worry about me, I'll manage." Then I texted Troy privately, "I need every receipt, every email, every invoice related to this wedding on my desk by tomorrow morning." If they wanted to play games, I'd show them what real power looked like. The contracts and invoices told a disturbing story. My family hadn't just been spending Preston's money recklessly. They'd been committing fraud using my venue's name. The florist had been told that estate management required rare imported orchids, forcing a $15,000 upcharge. The caterer received similar instructions about a mandatory premium menu, adding $20,000 to the bill. The photographer was informed that only certain luxury packages met the venue's standards. None of it was true. I'd never made any such requirements. My estate had standard guidelines. but nothing like what my family was claiming. They'd been forging my business's reputation to justify their extravagant spending, and Preston was footing the bill for all of it. I called each vendor personally. "This is Maya Reeves, owner of Ashford Estate," I said to each one. "I need to clarify some things about the Whitmore Reeves wedding." The florist sounded relieved to hear from me. "Oh, thank goodness. We were surprised by those requirements, but the mother of the bride insisted they came directly from you." "They didn't," I said firmly. "I'd like you to honor your original quote. In exchange, I need you to document exactly what was said and who said it." Every vendor agreed eagerly, happy to avoid the inflated costs and grateful for my intervention. By the end of the day, I had a file full of evidence showing my family's lies. They'd committed fraud, and I had proof. The family bonding day was my mother's idea. She insisted we all go dress shopping together. Just Vanessa, Becca, her and me. I almost declined, but curiosity won. I wanted to see how they'd treat me in public. The boutique was the kind of place where they served champagne, and the saleswomen evaluated your net worth within seconds of you walking through the door. Vanessa tried on an $8,000 gown while staff members fawned over her, adjusting the train and cooing about how stunning she looked. When I moved toward the racks to browse, a saleswoman intercepted me with a tight smile. "The sales section is in the back, dear," she said, gesturing dismissively toward a darker corner of the store. My mother said nothing. Vanessa pretended not to hear. I walked calmly to the front of the store instead, to a gown I'd noticed in the window. It was ivory with gold threading, elegant and dramatic. The price tag read $12,000. I pulled out my black American Express card and handed it to the startled saleswoman. "I'll take this one," I said. My mother's face went pale. "Maya, you can't afford that. You need to return it right now." The card went through without issue. I signed the receipt and smiled. "It's already paid for." Vanessa stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Where did you get that kind of money?" I gathered my shopping bag. "I've been working," I said simply. The car ride home was completely silent. My father showed up at my apartment 2 days later, unannounced and angry. He pounded on the door until I opened it, then pushed past me into my small living room. "We need to talk about where you're getting money," he demanded. "Your mother told me about the dress. That card. I want to know what's going on." I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. "I told you, I work hard. I invest wisely." He laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. "You've never been smart enough for that, Maya. Are you involved in something illegal? Borrowed money from loan sharks? Because if you're about to embarrass this family with some scandal right before Vanessa's wedding—" "I'm not involved in anything illegal," I interrupted calmly. His face reddened. "Then explain the money. Now." I met his eyes steadily. "I don't owe you an explanation about my finances, Dad. You've made it very clear over the years that my life isn't your concern." "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. "I'm your father. I have a right to know." "You're my father when it's convenient," I replied quietly. "When it makes you look good or when you think I might embarrass you. Otherwise, I'm just the daughter you wish would disappear." He opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "We'll figure out what you're hiding," he said finally. "And when we do, you'll regret making us look like fools." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer. My father was investigating me, which meant I needed to ensure all my legal protections were airtight. The seating chart arrived via email with a cheerful message from Vanessa. "Can't wait to celebrate with everyone." I opened the attachment and scrolled through the carefully arranged tables. Table 1 was for Vanessa, Preston, and the wedding party. Tables 2 through 5 held Preston's family and their closest friends. Tables 6 through 10 were my parents' friends and our extended family. I kept scrolling. Table 15, Table 16, Table 17. Finally, at Table 18, the farthest table from the head table, positioned right next to the service entrance where staff would be rushing back and forth all night, I found my name. Maya Reeves, +1. I was seated with people I'd never met. Distant cousins of Preston's family. Random +1s, people who probably wouldn't even show up. The message was crystal clear. I was invited because Preston had insisted, but I didn't matter. I was an afterthought, an obligation, someone to hide in the corner where I couldn't damage their perfect image. I printed the seating chart and pinned it to my office wall. Troy walked in, saw it, and winced. "That's pretty brutal," he said. "What are you going to do?" I smiled slowly. "Keep score," I replied. Every insult, every dismissal, every small cruelty, I was cataloging it all. And when the moment came to reveal the truth, I wanted to remember exactly why they deserved what was coming. I found out about the rehearsal dinner from Instagram. Becca posted a story showing a private room at the city's most exclusive restaurant with the caption, "Celebrating with the people who matter most." I scrolled through her posts. There was my entire family, laughing and toasting with champagne. Preston's parents, the wedding party, everyone dressed in expensive outfits, enjoying a multi-course meal I hadn't been invited to. My mother appeared in one video talking about how blessed they were to be joining such a wonderful family. Vanessa looked radiant in a designer dress, Preston's arm around her waist. Not once did anyone mention my absence. It was like I didn't exist. I was at the estate that night, doing a final walkthrough to ensure everything was perfect for tomorrow. I stood alone in the grand ballroom, looking at the space where my family would celebrate while pretending I wasn't related to them. My phone buzzed. A text from Preston. "I asked about you tonight. They said you had a conflict. I'm sorry you couldn't make it." I appreciated that he'd noticed, that he'd cared enough to ask. But we both knew the truth. There was no conflict. They simply hadn't wanted me there. I typed back, "No worries. See you tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet ballroom, surrounded by the beauty I'd created, and let myself feel the full weight of their rejection one last time. Tomorrow, everything would change. I arrived at Ashford Estate before dawn on the wedding day. The morning air was cool and misty, and the gardens looked like something from a fairy tale. I walked through every space, checking details one final time. The terrace where Vanessa would exchange vows, the ballroom where they'd dance, the gardens where photos would be taken. Everything was flawless because I'd made it flawless. I'd spent 3 years turning this crumbling estate into something magical, and today it would be the backdrop for my family's triumph over me. Except they didn't know yet that it was mine. I returned to my car and changed into my emerald gown. In my clutch, I'd placed printed copies of every fraudulent vendor email and a handwritten letter I'd written to my parents. I still wasn't sure if I'd use them, but having them felt like armor. Troy arrived and found me in my office. "Your mother just called the front desk," he said carefully. "She asked if you could use the service entrance when you arrive so you don't interfere with family photos." My hands trembled with rage. Even here in my own venue, they wanted me to use the staff entrance like I was an employee to be hidden away. I took a deep breath and stood. "Tell her," I said slowly, "that I'll use whatever entrance I choose." I walked through the main entrance just as my family was posing on the grand staircase for photos. The photographer was positioning them carefully, making sure the chandelier sparkled in the background. My mother saw me first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed as she rushed over, her smile vanishing the moment she was out of camera range. "You're early," she hissed quietly. "We're not ready for guests yet. You need to wait outside or use another entrance." I didn't move. I stood there in my $12,000 emerald gown, my hair professionally styled, looking more elegant than I ever had in my life. The photographer, sensing drama, kept his camera raised. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs in her wedding gown. "Maya, seriously, you can't just..." She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes traveled from my face down to my dress, taking in every expensive detail. The emerald silk caught the light from the chandelier, making me glow. The color photographed beautifully against the cream marble of the estate. My dress was more expensive than hers, and everyone could tell. Becca whispered loudly to another bridesmaid, "How did she afford that?" My father stepped forward, his face red. "Maya, I'm asking you nicely to leave and come back during cocktail hour with the other guests." I met his eyes steadily. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," I said. The photographer kept shooting. Preston separated from the wedding party and walked over to me, his expression apologetic. "Maya, I'm so sorry," he said quietly, guiding me away from my fuming parents. "They're being completely unreasonable." We stepped into a quiet corner of the lobby. Preston looked exhausted, and the wedding hadn't even started yet. "I've been thinking a lot this week," he continued. "About your family, about how they treat you. It's cruel, Maya. The spending, the comments, uninviting you, and then acting like they're doing you a favor by letting you come. I'm starting to see things I don't like." I felt a surge of sympathy for him. He was a genuinely kind person who'd gotten tangled up with my family's dysfunction. "Are you having doubts about the wedding?" I asked carefully. "Not about Vanessa," he said quickly. "I love her, but her family's values, the way they're obsessed with appearances and money and status, the way they treat you like you're worthless because you're not wealthy." He paused. "Are you okay? Do you have somewhere else you'd rather be? Because I'd understand if you wanted to leave." I almost told him everything right then, but something held me back. "I'm staying," I said firmly. "I need to see this through." Preston studied my face, seeming to understand something unspoken. "If you need anything today, anything at all, you tell me. Promise?" "I promise," I said. He squeezed my hand and returned to Vanessa, leaving me standing alone in the lobby of my own estate. The ceremony was beautiful in the way expensive things always are. Vanessa and Preston stood on the terrace overlooking gardens I'd personally designed, exchanging vows under an arch covered in flowers I'd approved. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light. I sat in the very last row, watching my family cry happy tears. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, whispering to relatives about how blessed they were. My father beamed with pride, his chest puffed out like he'd accomplished something remarkable. Nobody looked back at me. Nobody acknowledged that the daughter and sister they'd tried to exclude was sitting 20 rows behind them, watching their moment of triumph. When Preston kissed Vanessa, the crowd erupted in applause. I stayed seated, my hands folded in my lap, feeling strangely calm. During the recessional, as Vanessa and Preston walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Vanessa's eyes found mine. For just a second, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Maybe? Recognition? But then Preston squeezed her hand and she looked away, smiling for the cameras. The wedding planner appeared beside me as guests began standing and making their way to cocktail hour. She leaned down and whispered, "Miss Reeves, the owner would like to see you in the private office." I smiled. "Tell the owner, I'll be right there." Cocktail hour was in full swing when Frederick, the estate manager who'd worked for me since I bought the property, approached the microphone on the small stage. He was an older gentleman with silver hair and a dignified presence that commanded attention. The room gradually quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment," Frederick said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's a tradition here at Ashford Estate that we uphold for every wedding." My mother's face lit up. Meeting the mysterious estate owner was exactly the kind of status moment she lived for. She straightened in her chair, already preparing her most charming smile. Frederick continued, "The owner of Ashford Estate has a tradition of offering a personal toast to every couple married on these grounds. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing someone very special." The room went completely silent. Every eye focused on Frederick. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce the owner of Ashford Estate, Miss Maya Reeves." Time seemed to stop. I watched my mother's champagne glass slip from her fingers and shatter against the marble floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. My father's face drained of all color, his mouth falling open in shock. Vanessa's hand flew to her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. Preston looked confused, glancing between me and his new wife. Every single person in that ballroom turned to stare at me. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me. My heels clicked against marble as I walked toward the microphone, each step deliberate and measured. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Frederick handed me the microphone with a small, knowing smile. He'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. I looked out at the sea of faces. Preston's family, wealthy and refined, leaning forward with interest. My extended family, mouths hanging open in shock. Vendors I'd personally called to expose my family's fraud, barely suppressing smiles. And at the head table, my parents and sister, frozen like statues. "Thank you, Frederick," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I don't usually make appearances at events, but today is special. This is my sister's wedding. I paused, letting that sink in. I want to thank Vanessa and Preston for choosing Ashford Estate for their celebration. This place means everything to me. I've poured my heart and soul into it for the past 3 years, turning it from a crumbling historic building into what you see today. I looked directly at my parents. This estate has taught me something important. It's taught me that value isn't measured by what people think of you. It's measured by what you build when they're not watching, by the work you do when nobody's applauding. My mother's face had gone from white to red, humiliation and rage mixing in equal measure. I continued my toast, keeping my voice gracious but pointed. I'd like to thank some very special people who made this day possible. The florist, Marcus, who created these stunning arrangements. Marcus raised his glass from across the room, a slight smile on his face. The caterer, Anne, who prepared this incredible meal. Anne nodded, her expression knowing. And the musicians who will be playing tonight. Thank you all for your patience with some very unusual last-minute demands. Several vendors shifted in their seats, glancing at my parents. I wasn't explicitly accusing anyone of fraud, but everyone who'd been involved knew exactly what I was referring to. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. I believe strongly in honesty and integrity in business, I said, and in family. Those values are what built this estate and what will sustain it for years to come. I raised my glass toward Vanessa and Preston. To Vanessa and Preston, may your marriage be built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. May you always see each other's true value, even when others can't. The room applauded, but it was awkward and uncertain. People weren't sure what they'd just witnessed, but they knew it was significant. Preston stood and walked over to me, wrapping me in a tight hug. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear. Vanessa remained frozen in her chair. My parents had disappeared. I set down the microphone and walked calmly back to table 18, the farthest table in the room. I didn't need to sit at the head table anymore. From here I could see everything. I found them on the terrace 20 minutes later. My mother and father stood with their backs to the party, staring out at gardens they'd praised just hours ago without knowing I'd created them. "How dare you?" my mother hissed the moment she saw me, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you embarrass us like that in front of everyone?" My father turned, his face twisted with anger and humiliation. "Where did you get the money, Maya? Did you steal it? Fraud? Because there's no way you earned enough to buy a place like this." I stayed calm, my hands relaxed at my sides. "Grandma Ruth left me everything when she died. The grandmother you abandoned because she married someone you considered beneath her. The grandmother only I bothered to visit." My mother's eyes widened. "Ruth was practically destitute. She lived in that tiny house. She had nearly $3 million and this estate," I interrupted. "She left it all to me because I was the only one who loved her for who she was, not what she could give me." My father laughed bitterly. "So you've been sitting on millions for years, watching us struggle to pay for this wedding, and you said nothing? You uninvited me to my own sister's wedding," I said, my voice sharp now, "because I was too poor to be seen with you. You've spent my entire life treating me like an embarrassment. Yes, I let you proceed. I wanted you to see exactly who you are." My father's face hardened. "You need to make this right. Refund the venue fee. We're family. You can't charge your own family." I pulled out my phone and opened the file of evidence I'd collected. "You committed fraud using my estate's name," I said, showing them email after email. "You told vendors I required expensive upgrades that I never authorized. You forged my business's reputation to justify spending Preston's money on things you wanted." My mother's hand flew to her mouth as she read the messages. "We were just trying to make the wedding special." "You were lying and stealing," I cut her off. "I could press charges. I have documentation of everything. Or you could pay your bill in full, apologize, and leave me alone." My father tried to bluster, but he knew he was caught. "The bill is $75,000. I continued. "Preston paid $65,000 because I gave him a discount for being kind to me. You owe me $10,000. "That's ridiculous," my mother gasped. "We're not paying you." "Then I'll send this evidence to the district attorney and let them decide if vendor fraud is worth prosecuting," I said calmly. "Your choice." My father grabbed my mother's arm. "We'll pay," he said through gritted teeth. Good, I replied. And one more thing. From now on, you contact me only when I permit it. No more surprise visits. No more demands. No more treating me like I'm worthless. I'm done shrinking myself so you can feel big. I walked away, leaving them standing on the terrace of my estate, finally understanding how powerless they really were. I was sitting alone in the garden later that night when I heard footsteps behind me. Vanessa appeared, still in her wedding gown, mascara streaked down her face. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I nodded, gesturing to the bench beside me. She sat carefully, arranging her dress around her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I didn't know," she finally said, "about Mom and Dad uninviting you. They did it without telling me." I didn't believe her. She'd been in the group chat, seen the mocking messages, said nothing. But I let her continue. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "I just need you to know something. I've been jealous of you my whole life." I turned to stare at her, genuinely shocked. "Jealous of me? You were the favorite. You got everything." "I got things," she corrected. "But you got freedom. You never needed their approval. You just existed, did what you wanted, became who you were. I've been performing for them since I was 5 years old. Every smile, every achievement, every choice, I've been playing a role." Tears streamed down her face now. "When I saw you tonight, owning all this, standing up there and refusing to apologize for being successful, I realized something. You won. You actually escaped, and I'm still trapped trying to be whoever they want me to be." It wasn't a full apology. It didn't erase years of dismissal and cruelty, but it was the first honest thing my sister had ever said to me, and that counted for something. Preston called me the next morning, asking to meet at the estate. I agreed, curious what he wanted to discuss. He arrived still wearing his tuxedo from the wedding, looking like he hadn't slept all night. "I'm postponing the honeymoon," he said without preamble. We sat in my office, 2 cups of coffee between us. I need time to think about everything that came out yesterday. About Vanessa's family, about the lies, the fraud, the way they treated you. He looked exhausted and sad. "I love Vanessa, but I can't ignore what I learned. They were using me, using my money, and she either didn't know or didn't care enough to stop it." "What are you going to do?" I asked. Preston ran his hands through his hair. "Couples therapy, probably. Have some hard conversations. Figure out if we can build a marriage on honesty when her family taught her that appearances matter more than truth." He pulled out his checkbook and wrote something, sliding it across the desk. It was for $10,000. "Your parents will never pay you what they owe," he said. "But you deserve it. Consider it a wedding gift." I tried to protest, but he held up his hand. "Please, Maya, let me do this one thing right." I accepted the check, touched by his kindness. "Can I ask you something?" Preston said. "Would you have told me the truth if I hadn't figured it out?" I thought about it carefully. Eventually, yes. But I needed them to expose themselves first. I needed you to see who they really were without me having to convince you. Preston nodded slowly. "I'm glad you did. Thank you for caring enough to let the truth come out." 2 weeks later, my entire family requested a meeting at the estate. My lawyer advised me to record it, so I set up cameras in my conference room. They filed in like defendants awaiting sentencing. My mother, my father, Vanessa, Uncle Harold, cousin Becca, all of them looking uncomfortable and uncertain. My mother had prepared a written statement. She read it in a shaking voice, apologizing for years of mistreatment, dismissal, and cruelty. She acknowledged they'd made me feel worthless and unwanted. My father admitted he'd been wrong about my intelligence and capabilities, that he'd underestimated me because it was easier than acknowledging his own failures. Becca apologized for the group chat messages and for years of mocking me at family gatherings. Uncle Harold said he'd been following my parents' lead, without thinking about how his words affected me. Vanessa spoke last. "I'm starting therapy," she said quietly, "to figure out who I am without their approval. I want to be more like you, Maya, strong enough to stand alone." I listened to all of it without interrupting. When they finished, silence filled the room. "I accept your apology," I finally said. "But I don't forgive you yet. Forgiveness is something you earn, not something you get because you got caught." I laid out my boundaries, supervised contact only, no surprise visits, no financial requests, no using my name or business for social clout. If they violated any of these terms, I'd cut contact completely. They agreed to everything. As they left, my mother paused at the door. "We really are proud of you," she said softly. I didn't respond. Words were easy. I'd wait to see if their actions matched. 6 months later, I stood in the same garden where Vanessa had gotten married, but today I was overseeing a Fortune 500 company retreat. Ashford Estate had become one of the most prestigious venues on the East Coast. I'd expanded to 3 properties and employed 50 people. Troy had been promoted to operations director. I had interviews scheduled with Forbes and Architectural Digest. Vanessa and Preston were still married, working through their issues in therapy. She'd started a job at a nonprofit, trying to build an identity separate from our parents' expectations. We had coffee once a month. The conversations were still awkward, but they were honest. My parents sent monthly emails now, polite updates about their lives, never asking for anything. They were trying, slowly, to rebuild trust. They'd even started volunteering at the nursing home where Grandma Ruth had lived, which felt like appropriate penance. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "I'm proud of you." I should have said that years ago. I looked out over the estate, at everything I'd built from inheritance, determination, and the quiet strength of a grandmother who saw my worth when nobody else did. I typed back, "Thank you. That means something now." And it did. Not everything, but something. I'd built an empire from the ashes of their rejection. And this time, I was the one deciding who got a seat at the table.